All right, welcome to the Art of Healing with your host, Dr. Judy Jasek of Animal Healing Arts, and myself, Matt Rowe of ParsleyPet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and alternative treatments for cancer, unexplained illnesses, and supporting your pet's natural ability to heal. Welcome, Dr. Judy, to this week's show.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
This is awesome to have you on. So today, and you had brought up this topic in our pre-show discussion. We're going to talk about glyphosate and DCM. We have some individuals that Dr. Judy and I both know. Krista at Wag Out Loud just wrote a really good article about glyphosate and DCM, and we want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So, Dr. Judy, why did this come up for you as being a moment of curiosity and just really getting your attention?
Well, this DCM issue, which is dilated cardiomyopathy, if anybody isn't familiar with what DCM is, which is a form of heart disease and can cause dysfunction of the heart, has been linked to grain-free diets. It's been associated with dogs that eat grain-free kibble as opposed to kibble with grain in it. And this recommendation has come out that dogs need to eat grain, which is ridiculous. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense from a nutritional standpoint, because the other thing that the DCM has been linked to is low taurine, which does make sense. Taurine is an essential amino acid, and it's very important for normal heart function. Well, the best source of taurine is fresh meat and organ meats, right? So us raw feeders like myself and you, Matt, to me, it's like a no-brainer. We'll just feed raw and you don't have to worry about it. Right. The whole issue comes off the table. But, there's propaganda pushed out by, corporations that want to sell product, and it actually, they push out facts and propaganda, and, really it's nothing but a marketing campaign to try to sell more food, because it never made sense to me, because grains are not a source of taurine. So why are they even saying that? And maybe there's some link there between the things that they're using in the food other than grain might be somehow linked to the DCM, but it isn't the lack of grain. And that's what they're putting out there. And it just baffles me that, medical professionals don't question that, because it really doesn't even make any sense. And so I was listening to this podcast on Wag Out Loud earlier this week, and Krista was interviewing a veterinarian who was talking about the effects of glyphosate on the taurine levels. And the way that happens is there's taurine precursors. So dogs can make taurine from other amino acids. And what they're finding now is that the glyphosate breaks down or denatures these preliminary amino acids, and then they can't effectively be made into taurine in the dog's body. And I'm like, that makes sense to me, because, as we've talked about, Matt, and you're in direct contact with labs that do glyphosate testing, this is a nasty, nasty chemical. It has so many deleterious effects on the body. It actually has been licensed as an antibiotic. So it's very disruptive for the microbiome, can cause leaky gut. It's a known carcinogen now.
It's an herbicide.
So it does not surprise me at all that this could be a contributing factor. And, Matt, you guys are doing glyphosate testing, and I really want to get the message out there to people. This is bad stuff. You don't want to be feeding your pet a food that's full of glyphosate. And anymore, all kibble is full of glyphosate.
It is. And when you talk to Larry Bolin over at HRI Labs, who I've known for years, Larry talks about that they're seeing 10 times above the amount of glyphosate exposure in pets as it is for humans. So as you know, glyphosate is spread on all of our seed prior to growth, and it causes germination within that specifically genetic modified seed. They call it Roundup Ready. And so, but glyphosate is just Roundup. So they spray glyphosate on top of the grain to get it to grow. Then at the time of harvest, 2 weeks before harvest, they spray it again. But that doesn't mean we're talking garbanzo beans, lentils, wheat, soy. I mean, you name the grain, it's getting glyphosate spread on it. So when we go to these grain-free diets that have a lot of these other like garbanzo beans and lentils and other ingredients in it to keep it from being grain-free, they still have high levels of glyphosate on top of it. So we are exposing our animals to 10 times above the amount of glyphosate that we see in humans because of this. But you make up a great point, is if we're putting a synthetic based taurine into the diet in order for the dog to receive the amount of taurine it needs to keep DCM from happening, do you think the glyphosate is actually keeping the synthetic taurine from being absorbed into the system?
I suspect so. I mean, I think, this is an area of active research, but
Right.
It sounds like perhaps the glyphosate is breaking it down or denaturing it so it doesn't have the normal effect on the body. It's not in a natural form to begin with. And, I have an issue with using a lot of synthetic vitamins and minerals in pet diets anyway. I believe they should be getting their nutrition from whole food sources, not synthetic sources, because we just don't know how well that's going to be absorbed and assimilated. But then you have a chemical that can potentially break down these amino acids and denature them so that they're not maybe not effectively absorbed to begin with, or just changed into a form that the body can't utilize and assimilate.
Right. Yeah, and that's anytime we disrupt. I mean, you brought up a great point about your gut microbiome. And I'm doing some research now on gut microbiome, not just with humans, but also in our pets, is that it is a forgotten organ. I mean, it is a live organism within our bodies that outnumbers our cells hundreds to one. So essentially, philosophically, we're all just bacteria walking around. It's on our skin, it's in our mouths, it's in our bodies, and it's all around us. And now they're starting to see that this bacteria, this good beneficial bacteria inside our bodies, is actually promoting health. And so if we're taking glyphosate that is coming through and killing that bacteria, and because as you said, it was originally prescribed as a antibiotic. So I don't think that in the long-term effects of just human and our pet health, it's wise to be spreading glyphosate on all of this, on all of our food.
Yeah, right. And, if your pet's eating a dry food diet, I mean, it's bad enough that glyphosate is so prevalent in our environment. You see people out spraying. I see my neighbors out there spraying their Roundup to kill the dandelions and all the other weeds. And I have a yard full of weeds and dandelion that are slowly taking over the grass because we don't spray. And I do like to go out and pick the dandelions. Just haven't had time to get out there and do it. So we got quite a few. But I want to keep my yard chemical free, not only for my pets, but these chemicals also get down into the aquifer and are in the general water supply. So it's getting harder and harder to get away from it. So you also need to be careful about where you take your pet. These beautifully groomed parks, and I can see this so clearly now. You go and where there's ball fields or fields where the kids play sports. They've still been treating them so there's these beautifully manicured lawns, and then all around the periphery are it's just all weeds and dandelions, and that's where it's safe to let your dog walk, not on the beautifully groomed lawns. But a step beyond that, if you're feeding it twice a day, so it's going right into the body, you definitely want to avoid these other environmental exposures. But when the dog is actually ingesting it, it's going right into the gut. twice a day, I think that's going to be devastating. I think it's already been devastating, and it's starting to answer a lot of questions. Well, why are cancer rates going up? Well, if pets are getting a dose of glyphosate twice a day in their food and possibly even in their treats, depending on what kind of treats you feed, well, hello, you're disrupting the microbiome, which is disrupting the immune system, and then you're feeding them a known carcinogen. The pets don't have a chance. There's no escaping that, and it can't ever get cleared out of the body either, because they're getting it day after day after day.
Yeah, you make up a great point. If it's continually, now, when I talk to Larry about it, Larry goes, it chelates, it leaves your body within 7 days. Mm-hmm. But like you just said, we're constantly reintroducing this on an hourly basis back into the body and back into our pet's body. So if our pet is a proverbial canary in the coal mine on all these health issues that are coming in, even for ourselves, the fact that we are feeding glyphosate at some level to ourselves, well, our pets are showing us what is happening when we ingest too much glyphosate.
Yeah, right. At least we, switch off, like we might have a meal with, salad that maybe doesn't have so much. Or if you eat like a low carb diet, our bodies at least can, sometimes get a little bit of a break from it.
Yeah.
But our pets, our pets are not. And I think it's going to continue to get worse. They're not going to use less glyphosate, because glyphosate's a huge moneymaker, right, for Monsanto. And, I think it's also worth mentioning, this doesn't get a lot of, recognition in this country. Other parts of the world outlaw it. They won't allow it to be used.
Yeah.
And, I've talked to people that, like, in this country, like, they can't eat anything with gluten. They can't eat grains. They feel sick, and they can go to other parts of the world and eat products with grain in them and not feel sick at all. So is it the grain or is it the glyphosate? I mean, it could, I think there is still some true, gluten sensitivity, but for some individuals that they don't demonstrate symptoms when they eat grain that's not sprayed with glyphosate, that's pretty significant. And, I want people to realize that some information just kind of gets, brushed off, pushed under the rug, so to speak, because companies make a lot of money selling these chemicals and spraying them. And they keep coming up with more reasons. Like, it's bad enough that they're spraying them to kill weeds. Now they spray the seeds to help them germinate. And now they spray, the products, right before harvest to help dry them. Right. They're just coming up with more and more reasons to use it. So there's more and more contamination. And so I think this is going to get worse. You have to get away from the processed foods, or they're just going to keep making pets sicker and sicker and sicker.
Right. So, I mean, you started to allude to it, one of the best ways to avoid it. So for everybody that's watching now, and for everybody that watches in the future, one way to avoid glyphosate is to feed raw. Is really get back to the way your dog should be eating, which is a raw-based diet. And if you're concerned about DCM with a raw diet, one of the best areas to get taurine is from the heart muscle. So when you're feeding that, when you're feeding a variety of organ meats, you can actually start, you don't have to worry about DCM. I mean, this is something I've been feeding both of my puppies raw for the last 3 years. And not one issue of DCM, no health conditions. We don't see anything in either of them unless they jump a fence. And so,
right.
That's a whole nother story down the road for all the listeners. But really, going through on that side is, yes, feeding a raw diet. Now, for us as human beings, the more organic we can go. Now, granted, you're going to hear the reports that say on the edge of the field, even if you buy organic, you're going to get overspray on glyphosate, but it does limit the amount of exposure an organic strawberry or an organic vegetable does receive in regards to glyphosate that's getting sprayed. Yes, there is trace elements about it and where it can be, but I'm going to get glyphosate, and essentially I've heard that it is airborne.
Mm-hmm.
We can.
I've heard it's in the rain. It gets up in the air and then it comes down in the rain even.
Mm-hmm. So this is just in our environment. This is just what's happening. And I hope with the current health conditions today that we're all experiencing, I hope we're waking up to the impact that we're making, not only to our planet, but to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have to do the best you can. You know, I don't think it makes sense to say, well, you can't get away from it completely, so I'm not even going to try, because it's still better to eat products that are at least grown in a field that isn't directly sprayed with the glyphosate. You know, another thing that I heard too on this podcast that she brought up a good point is that non-GMO is not the same as organic. So non-GMO does not mean that it's not going to have glyphosate or other chemicals. If you want to avoid glyphosate, you really have to go with the organic labeling, or grow your own food. Start a garden, learn how to garden, start to grow some stuff your own, grow some food of your own, because that's really the only way to know for sure what you're eating.
And really, and not spread it on your lawns. I mean, that's something I stopped doing 2 years ago, was stop spraying my lawn with weed killer or, weed and feed. I mean, you name the product from Scott's or with Roundup in it or anything like that. Yeah, it's going to have glyphosate. So it doesn't get spread on anywhere near my garden, as I want all my vegetables to be as nutrient dense as possible.
Right.
Good soil health.
Right. And you want your pets to be healthy too.
Right. So it's almost like a rite of passage. Like when you see Dr. Judy's lawn or you see my lawn, you see some dandelions pop up in it, you know that we are taking the steps to make sure not only is our groundwater and the aquifers not getting exposed to glyphosate, but also our pets aren't either. I mean, I have no concerns of taking my puppies out in the backyard or letting them play or letting them dig or letting them get involved or nose to the ground. I only get really concerned is when we go to the open field that is green.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like a perfect lawn. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you mentioned the amount of chemicals they spread on that to actually make that happen.
Yeah, because lawn doesn't grow in Colorado naturally. We're dry. We're very dry climate. We're a high desert. And we're not meant to grow Kentucky bluegrass here, these, perfect, pristine lawns. If you look at native grasses, they grow very rapidly in the spring and they might get very tall, but then they dry by, the middle of June. Here at the, lower elevations, like around Denver, they're drying up and they're done. That's it. They're done growing. They get that growth spurt when we have that early moisture and then they're done. It's a waste of water and resources, in my opinion, to be keeping these perfectly green lawns. I think we should be growing more native plants, to save our resources. And then you don't, if you grow things that are meant to grow in your geographic location, then you're not going to have as many invasive, weeds and things like that to deal with, because your plants are going to be healthier and it's easier to maintain them.
So what do you do for like Wiley, which is your puppy? What do you do to keep them from exposure to glyphosate in your world?
Well, I take them, like I said, we don't use it at all in our home. So I feel like they're safe in the yard. Of course, I see my neighbor spraying all the time. She's got the tree guys out there like twice a week and God knows what they're spraying. So, it just, you have to realize that there could still be some exposure, but at least I know in our yard, they're safe. And then when I take my pups to walk, there's a little lake just a few minutes away. And there's some trails where it's all natural, it's just all natural grasses and weeds. And I avoid the areas where there's ballparks and stuff around the lake. And I avoid those areas and I just go where it's natural and wild. And I put them in the car. I don't walk the neighborhood. I do some in the wintertime because people aren't spraying, but once springtime starts, I put them in the car and we drive over there. And I have this discussion with my clients a lot. And it's hard for people, especially people that live, more in the city, in the more densely populated areas. It's hard to find areas that aren't sprayed. And I really encourage people to, find a green belt or, a creek or someplace that does not a finely groomed lawn, and where it's still wild and natural. And those are really the safest places to take your pets and walk them.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, no, and I'm going to second that. Is I just pay attention to what's around you. If it's too green and it's not supposed to be, you know how they got it green, they put chemicals on it.
Yeah. And even people spray the cracks in their sidewalks and the driveway and all of that. So really this time of year, it's everywhere. If there's any kind of rock landscaping, that tends to get sprayed because, it's a pain to go pull the weeds. We've got rocks. I go out, I pull the weeds. I try to do it after a rain, so the soil's real soft and they're not so hard to pull up, but I'm not going to go out and spray them. You just got to do a little, this little elbow grease and put a little effort into it and just go out there and pull them out.
Yeah.
And maybe just don't get so hung up. I look at it like, I don't really care if my yard has dandelions because I'd rather have it be chemical free. And dandelions are actually, very great medicinal plants too. That's why I go out and pick mine and dry them. Yeah. And they're very nutritious. You can put them in smoothies. They're very detoxifying. They're supportive to the liver and kidneys. They're really an amazing plant, and we just see them as weeds. And they grow, anywhere and everywhere, but those hardy plants are also tend to be very nutritious. So, you got a volunteer crop of dandelions growing, take advantage of it. Pick those greens and put them in your salad, or, if you're so inclined, make some dandelion wine. I don't know how to do that, but I know some people do.
Look at you go. Like, this is really what is, taking something that has been said to us is not, pristine or good looking, and turn it into something good. I mean, definitely take a look at the other sides of the research of it all. And this is the steps. They're small little steps that you can take right now to keep your dog away from glyphosate and to keep your dog away from all of this. And if you're curious about it, is my dog been exposed to glyphosate, or how high are my dog's glyphosate levels? Become a part of the animal study. So we are partnering with HRI Labs, and the animal exposure study is what we're helping them with. But also with it, you get a test, you find out what level of glyphosate is in your dog. And it's a very simple urine test, and a little bit of urine, just a little bit. Larry can tell you what levels of glyphosate is inside your dog at parts per billion. So really taking those steps then will allow you to take the action steps to keep glyphosate from infiltrating their system and give them a fighting chance away from cancer and away from all these dangerous things that are coming, and potentially DCM if you're deciding to feed a grain-based diet.
Yeah, I think it'll be very eye-opening for a lot of people, especially people that are feeding kibble, that this is really, really prevalent. And even, I've also heard that, there's a certain amount that they can have that their bodies are going to tolerate. And I personally don't think there's any really safe level of something this toxic. You don't want it in your pet's body. Obviously, higher levels are going to be more dangerous, but this is bad stuff, and you don't want your pet being exposed to it at all.
And I think it's the constant onslaught. We never allow the body, especially in our pets, to actually have their levels lowered by natural chelation of the actual herbicide itself. We're constantly reintroducing this. Your dog is basically surviving with having a herbicide inside their bodies, because if they're eating grain, then they're going outside and they're walking, they're doing all of this stuff. This is, on a side of dangerous, is we need to be the voice for our pets and help them.
Yes. And get educated, and, and ask questions too. I mean, you hear things like, well, you need to feed your pet food with grain in it to prevent heart disease. Ask some questions about why that's true, because there is no sound reasoning behind that. None whatsoever. It's all propaganda. And if you start challenging, well, where did that information come from? Are there any studies actually showing that that's true? There aren't any. And I think, pet parents really need to start asking some questions and, challenging their veterinarians a little bit. Where are you getting this information from?
Right.
So that what the truth is, that, so that you're getting the right information to keep your pet as healthy as possible.
Yeah, it's 100%, not to put all the onus on you as a pet parent, but as a pet parent, it's your responsibility to take care of your puppy. Just like if your dog jumps the fence, it's your responsibility to make sure that the fence is taken care of. I keep going back to fence because my puppy jumped the fence last week and cut his leg open. So yeah, so there's just definitely it's my responsibility. So it's also my responsibility to feed them a healthy diet that gives them all of these impactful nutrients and doesn't infiltrate their body with a potentially harmful chemical like glyphosate that they can receive from grains, from the no grain based diets. So, I mean, you're looking at so much of what we grow today is sprayed with glyphosate.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, very true. So you have to get educated, and you do need to advocate for your own pets. Make sure you're getting the right information.
And it's simple. It's simple. Once you start the steps and you start thinking about it, it's almost as if the veil gets removed and your eyes open up and you're like, oh, now I know what I need to do. And now I know how to avoid any other potential chemicals that come in to their bodies via glyphosate or from the grain or the food that they're eating. And it's not that much more expensive. I mean, it's simple. And I know right now where a lot of people are going through hardship, but like you had said early on, growing your own food is cheap. And it's fun.
It really is. Packet of seeds, pretty inexpensive.
Yep.
And if you think that, feeding your pet a raw food diet, is expensive, try paying for, cancer or, some other chronic illness, autoimmune disease or something like that. That's, going to be thousands and thousands of dollars. Feeding a raw diet is such an amazing insurance policy to help keep your pet healthy. And you're paying a little bit at a time. You're not having to, pay for thousands of dollars when your pet does get sick, not to mention the heartache of it. Even if money wasn't an issue, you don't want to see your pet with one of these serious illnesses that can be prevented.
Amen. Well said. Well, on that note, thank you, Dr. Judy, for being a part. So if someone wants to have a consultation with you and actually sit with you and, have a conversation via telemedicine, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
If they go to my website is ahavet.com. And there's a appointment tab there. You can go there and set up an appointment. You can email at info@ahavet.com. And the phone number is 720-515-2421. So yeah, reach out. I'm doing telemedicine, Zoom, or by phone. And I'm also still seeing some clients at my home. We were inside this morning because it was rainy and cold. And I said, I'm not doing a back porch appointment this morning. So we moved inside. So as you know, I have to kind of vary, where in my house I see appointments. So I just ask people, if you're sick, stay home. If you do come in, wear a mask, do some reasonable precautions, and we'll get your pets taken care of. At least you don't have to drop them off at the curb.
Yes, that's right. You can actually see your pet while they're getting treated.
Exactly.
Well, that is awesome. You can also know more about us at ParsleyPet.com, and you can actually order the glyphosate test at ParsleyPet.com. Just go to the products tab at the top, drill down, and it'll say glyphosate. So then at that point, get your test and really identify if you're feeding your dog the healthiest diet possible and making sure that they aren't exposed with glyphosate inside their system. So thank you again, Dr. Judy, for being a part of the show today. This awesome topic. I love it. As you know, I'm passionate about this stuff. So thank you very much for drilling down into this with us.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Appreciate you hosting.
You are so very welcome. And we'll see everybody down the road. And thanks for watching today.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.